other aspect ratio will be better, I guess. Like this. It looks better, so.
Oh, it works.
So when you want to start it, just switch it to notebook. So both screens will show your presentation, not this Twitter social.
I mean, should we switch it after?
As you want.
Oh, that's one.
If you prefer social interaction, you can leave it so, but during presentation is recommended to have just presentation.
Probably a good idea. Hi, another speaker will be Dennis Gilmore from the Fedora Release Engineering. Dennis has been with the Red Hat for quite some time, and he'll be talking about the state of release engineering in Fedora right now.
Hey all, I'm Dennis Gilmore. I am one of the Fedora release engineers. I can no longer say that I'm the Fedora release engineer. We actually have more than just me now, after 5 or so years of it being me, so that's kind of good. So in the last year, I'm going to talk about some of the things that we've changed. There's, in Fedora as a whole, there's been a lot of change. In Fedora release engineering, we've had a massive amount of change to make sure that, the change goes out. So Fedora.next was a big change for us in that the deliverables that were asked of us, dramatically increased. We had to add Atomic, we had to add, Docker-based images, all the products, try and get things out. And we got stuff out, and it was probably far from ideal in many ways. Like the cloud guys, they need an install tree to install the cloud images, but they don't necessarily want that to be something that the end users actively use. The end users in the cloud, they grab the image that's pre-canned and put it in. If someone wants to make their own cloud image that has the MySQL or whatever, Apache and other things, then they can use that install tree to make their image using ours and Image Factory that we do, but it's not something that the cloud guys want to actively promote as part of their product. So for Fedora 22, we're going to be doing some changes along the lines of being able to better chop up the distribution and put different pieces in different places so that everything is available, but is not necessarily out in everybody's face. Atomic was a big change in Fedora 22, and it was kind of a realization point in Fedora 21. It was a realization point that the way we do a lot of things is not very good. To enable making the Atomic tree, we had to touch not only the scripts that we used to make the Fedora release, we had to touch the scripts that we used to make Rawhide nightly, the script that we used to make the branch nightly. We also had to teach Bodhi how to make an Atomic tree. So we had to repeat this work 5 places to be able to make the Atomic tree as part of what Fedora is. Docker was a little easier. The Koji had Docker support, and as long as you got an Anaconda tree, it works. You put things in, you get Docker out. But apparently, we did have some issues with what was shipped because Docker upstream changed the way that they want things. They wanted to use XZ compression instead of gzip. So it kind of showed that there's some issues with our tooling that's not necessarily as flexible as what we would like, and we're not able to respond as quickly to changes in the world as we should be able to. And a big change in the last year is that the team has grown. A year ago, it was me with a little bit of help occasionally from people like Kevin Fenzi, or random people would come along and help with some stuff. Now we have Peter Robinson, who's working pretty much full-time on Fedora things, secondary architectures, and he helps with primary. We have Matthew Bryden, who is working in RelEng inside of Fedora, inside of Red Hat, but is doing Fedora stuff. We have Till Mass has come along from the community and has been a big help in helping drive some change in things in Fedora. I don't think he's in here, but it's really good that we're not only are we getting contributions from people inside of Red Hat, but we're getting contributions from people in the community, and hopefully, going forward, that's going to increase a lot as hopefully you'll see by what's coming up, what we'd like to do. So so far the last year has been a lot of change, and it's been good, and we still have a lot of change to go. So in the future, I have a lot of things that I would like to have happen. I'd like to have automated compose processes so that whenever Anaconda gets updated, we run a compose. When any part of the installer tree is updated, we run a compose so that we more quickly are able to detect that, hey, this new Anaconda sucks, or this new parted breaks partitioning, or whatever the case may be. So, and also having it automated. Right now, to run a Fedora compose, we go off and we run some scripts and we do some things. A lot of the stuff happens in parallel just because we've not coded the scripts to do things in serial, not just because we've not coded them to do it in parallel. And we don't really have any flexibility when something new comes along, like when Docker came along, and Docker wasn't, like when Atomic came along, we had to go and touch 5 different places, which is kind of silly. So right now we can't reuse a lot of the components. We have to write it for making an install tree. We have to then go write it for making updates tree. We've got to write another process to do the nightly rawhide. We're kind of wasting resources a little bit there. And we don't really have a consistency in the process. If you look at the scripts that we use to make nightly rawhide and the script we use to make the Fedora release tree, there's some things that are done in different ordering, and we pass slightly different arguments to different parts, not because we should, or they need to be done in a different order, but because we've had these disjointed compose processes that are not there's no consistency. So we need to have that. I'd like to have frequent composes as far as doing composes 7-8 times a day. I was talking to the OpenSUSE guys at FOSDEM last week. I went to one of their talks on the changes that they made in their release process over the last few years, and a lot of what they've done is things that we're looking to do or wanting to do. I would like to reuse some of their stuff, but I don't know that that's possible, in large part because it's so heavily tied into Open Build System and it's all written in Perl. So, I will definitely look at what they've done and see what we can take away from it. And, I haven't written Perl code since I was in university, and I'm not at all familiar with it. So, maybe the Perl SIG can come up and help us, as a short-term interim or, long-term, get involved and help maintain that code and help it to do the things we want. But all of our stuff in RelEng has been written in Python, and I'd kind of like to keep it that way. But they do, OpenSUSE does 7 or 8 composes a day. They say theirs takes 40 minutes. At the moment, for Fedora 21, ours were taking around the order of 8 to 12 hours from the time we ran the command at the start to the time we got to the end and the compose was done. So there's a lot of areas where we can parallelize things and speed it down. A lot of the stuff today happens on a single box, so longer term I want to make all the tasks be in Koji so that then we can just fire it off at builders, and we've got lots of them. So instead of running Punji to create the workstation install tree and then run it to create the server install tree, then run it to create the cloud install tree, we can send off a whole bunch of Koji tasks and create install trees in parallel for all of the different products. But part of what SUSE is doing, which I think is really cool, is like when their install is rebuilt, it triggers that they create an install tree, and then at the end of it they push it through a automated QA test, and they use OpenQA, which they do the installer, and it uses VNC, and it clicks on the right places and does an install. And at the end, they get they've got an automated validation matrix that this thing at least works basically. I think they then do some manual testing before they push that out to the users. One thing that they've done with their last couple of releases is they've not had an alpha release. They've had a beta release, and they've had the final release, and they've gotten rid of alpha. They've gotten rid of the alpha release altogether. And that would be kind of cool for us to be able to get rid of the alpha release, but it involves a lot of extra, like gating and automation of the processes to the point where we can be sure that, they, like for Fedora 21 finally did 5 RCs and 4 TCs, was it, Tim? Something like that? I don't remember, but we did quite a lot of TCs and RCs. I know we did 5 RCs. For OpenSUSE, for their last release, they had 2 RCs because of the continual testing and integration testing and the processes that they had set up. And that would be really nice to get to the point where we do this regular automated testing, and then QA doesn't have to do as much hands-on stuff. And then, hopefully we can get out of the cycle that we've been in, where we get to the end of the release and we're in a mad rush because, if we can get another compose done, fix this bug, test it, validate it, we can ship on time. Otherwise, we've got to slip. With more frequent and regular testing, hopefully we can get out of that because, we know ahead of time that, know earlier that things break. So I think that there's some lessons we can learn from SUSE there. A thing that I'd like to have is a framework for the different product life cycles. This is something that people have said fairly frequently, especially the server working group guys are like, I'd like to support a Fedora release for 12 to 18 to 24 months. But the workstation guys, we want to support a Fedora release for 7 months. They want, once 23 is released, a month later, they want to give you a bit of a window to go from 22 to 23, but they want everyone running, 23. Today, we can't do that because we shove everything into this one huge, big conglomerate called the Everything repo that's enabled on everyone's machines, and we push everything out as a huge, big blob. This is Fedora. It's 18,000 source packages in Rawhide right now, and that's something like on the 32-bit arches where we don't have multi-lib is somewhere in the order of close to 50,000 binary RPMs in the release, which is massive and unwieldy. And so I'd like to get to a point where we have, it kind of goes back to the rings concept. We have the base that's the minimal install Anaconda, so that's really tightly controlled. It's one repo, so that it's self-sufficient. In the worst case scenario, you can do an install from the minimal, from the base portion of Fedora. You get a working machine that you can do other stuff on. Workstation has their piece of the pie. Server has their piece of the pie. KDE has their piece of the pie. The spins, SIGs have their little piece, and we can look at then, breaking them into, different repositories and potentially supporting them in different life cycles. That will mean that things like PackageDB need to know, hey, this package is in this product, and this product is end of life, so this branch you can't push your changes to. It'll involve a lot of automated control over the Git repositories and the package tags to because otherwise you get to a point where if the workstation guys only want to support for 7 months and we say yeah you can, but the server guys are saying we're going to support for 2 years, there's this big window in between where workstation drops support and server does, and people are going to say, hey, well, it's supported, I want my updates, and it kind of becomes unwieldy, and you really, without a lot of control over it in an automated, hands-off way where you're not relying on people to do the right thing, but the systems keep things in check, you can't, we can't support, like Fedora today, we can't support different life cycles unless we fork everything and we say, okay, well, here's a workstation branch of everything, here's a server branch of everything, here's a, here's a cloud branch of everything, and that gets unwieldy because then you've forked Fedora in 3 different Fedoras, and that's. We don't have the resources to manage doing that. One thing I'd really like to do is integrate secondary arches so that when we do a compose for primary, one happens automatically on all the secondary arches. When a build happens in primary, as soon as it's complete, it gets fired off of the secondary arch as part of the managed Fedora internal infrastructure instead of being something that the secondary arch guys they're running Koji Shadow, and I mean, they're still going to deal with build failures and stuff, but instead of them having to run about running the tools just happen automatically. The composers just happen automatically. Secondary arches composed at the same time in the same way as primary does, so that ideally we're getting the exact same content out and we're knowing quicker that there's issues with secondaries as well as primaries. And it just gives an overall more cohesive view, more cohesive Fedora. I'd like to have a way to ship updates faster. Right now, when we push updates, from the time we tell Bodhi, let's push updates, to the time that hits the mirrors, we're looking at about an 8 to 9 hour turnaround time. And that's largely due to delta RPMs. We've done some work to try and make deltas happen in parallel instead of in serial as the code currently has it, and some other ways to make that quicker, but it's still really a poor experience, and maybe we need to rethink how we actually push updates. Do we need to mash the whole tree, or do we just push in this one RPM that's updated and make the delta and update the repo data, so that then perhaps in almost real time we can push out the updates to the users. As they go stable in Bodhi, the process automatically happens in the background and it goes out, and there's not this huge turnaround time that we have today from when we push updates. Today we push updates once a day. Maybe in the future we can push updates 20 times a day because the process is much quicker, and there's only 2 or 3 packages changing at a time as they come in. So I'd like to make that because I think it would be a better experience for the users. And I want to make Rawhide the place to be. So the developers use Rawhide. The only people using the stable releases are the users. Hopefully then that will mean that people push less updates, which will help with the updates shipping faster problem. Because the updates that are going out are likely to be more critical bug fixes and security issues, as opposed to, hey, I want the latest, I'm using Fedora 21, and I want the latest package of, version of my pet little project, and so you're pushing it out everywhere just because you can. To be able to make Rawhide the place to be, though, there's a lot of change we need to put in the processes and a lot of automated QA so that we can gate the packages and make sure that we don't break Rawhide for the users. Most people today say, I'm not going to use Rawhide because it eats babies. Well, let's make it not eat babies. Make it something that is changing rapidly, is giving you the latest things, but we also make sure that we're not pushing out stuff that's got broken dependencies. If there's a surname bump, let's especially something like ICU or Boost. The moment the guys that do Boost, when they do the version bumps, they request a side tag and they build everything on the side. But instead of having to do that, with the right processes, they could build Boost. The system can detect, hey, this breaks everything, and there's 400 packages that rely on this version of Boost. Automatically create the side tag, send out emails to the maintainers of all the packages. This package just updated and got a surname bump. Please go and fix your package against it. Here's the side tag. This is how you do the build. And that way, we can monitor things so that once at least the critical path stuff, the stuff that's in the base, or maybe we say the stuff that's in base, workstation and server and cloud, or some subset thereof, is actually everything's built against it. It's clean. Users are going to be able to get the updates and install it and test it and run it. Then we merge it in automatically. So that way we at least are pretty sure that we're not going to give a bad experience for the developers that are using Rawhide as their primary OS instead of Fedora 21 or 22 or whatever stable release of Fedora that they're running on. Yep. I keep going. So how do we get there? We get there by filling this position. Well, kind of. It's a job that was open last week for somebody to work with Atomic stuff, but it's release engineering. It's kind of a all-encompassing type role, and a large part of what they're going to be doing is working on tooling to enable Fedora to be more awesome. But that's not the only way that we're actually going to get there. We're going to have a Koji 2.0. We're in the process of sitting down and trying to come up with a roadmap for what that will be. I'm hoping to pretty much redesign Koji in such a way that, today, if you want to add a new task to Koji because, Atomic comes along or Docker comes along, you've got to get deeply involved in the Koji code, work out how you have to add a new task, work out what database schema you need to do. There's a bunch of things that you have to do, and it's not easy to, one, write the code and put it in the right place. Two, it's pretty damn difficult to test and debug and to know that it's actually going to do the right thing. So, one of the things I'd really like in Koji 2.0 is to pull all the tasks out of, the Koji the daemon and make them plugins, and make the plugin such that it's standalone. So the plugin that does build tasks, you can run on your machine and say, execute this, script or the plugin, pass in the right information. It's going to go off and go through all the build stuff. It's going to make the mock config, run mock, get the sources, and run mock and build it and output the right information. So then, if we can get to a point where we're doing that for all the different tasks, and the next shiny Docker or whatever comes along, instead of us going, well, how do we do this? Where do we integrate this? Try to write the code and spend a long time, we can say, well, we know that we're going to feed this. We need to feed this information into it, and you can write a standalone self-testable, plugin that will give us the output at the end. And once we can be really sure that once we've written and tested in a standalone environment that this plugin works, we put it into Koji, and bingo, we've got a new task. And then that should allow us to easily do things like use Maven instead of RPM to build, use apt for building Debian or something else. Use different types of build infrastructure. I mean, it would be kind of cool if Debian turned around and said, hey, you know what, this Koji thing's really cool, and it can build Debs. Let's use it. You know, you have a question? Right. So for the video, the question, or the comment was, it sounds more like a generic infrastructure rather than a specific thing. And really it is, because you know, we have so many different types of tasks we do. We create live CDs, we create images, we create RPMs. You know, people use Koji. Koji has a whole Maven framework which is kind of ugly and bolted in, but it's used. Koji has the ability to build Windows binaries using VMs, and it's kind of ugly, but you know, and that's used. Koji as a service is kind of more of a scheduling thing where you can say, you know, well, this task, we have to do this step, we have to do this step, and the builders say, hey, what tasks do you have? And you know, it's used as like a scheduling, what's available, what capacity do I have, and you know, so it's kind of making it more of a generic framework for doing, you know, tasks in an automated way, as opposed to being specific. I'm going to build a package, and you know, all I'm going to do is build a package. You know, the Windows binary building, the Maven stuff was all bolted in after, because Koji was designed over 10 years ago now, and it was designed with the goal of, hey, we're going to build RPMs in a pretty reproducible way because we're going to track everything and we'll know exactly what the input was so we can get the same output. So yeah, it is a slight change in what Koji is, but it's not really. It's kind of making... It's making what Koji's become Koji. It's become more of a generic task scheduler than a specific, I'm going to build a package. Bodai 2.0. So part of the atomic problem was we had to bolt into Bodai to say, hey, along with mashing these repos, you need to make a chroot, you need to fetch these files from Git, you need to then run this RPM OS tree command in the chroot so that we can get the atomic tree, and then you need to sync it here and do all sorts of stuff. And you know, with Bodai 2 still at the moment doesn't have a way for actually running the mash to create the updates tree, and the plan for it has been to do that in Koji. So along with updating what Koji does, part of Bodai 2.0 will be to do all the same things so that we're reusing the code. When you push an update, the same way that we push the compose is going to be the same way we push the updates. And maybe we can look at also other ways to actually speed up pushing out updates or doing different delivery methods with, maybe it's a Bodai 3.0 thing, I'm not sure. So we need to be able to quickly iterate. By breaking things into smaller chunks, it'll enable us to be able to quickly, run the little pieces of the process and the little pieces of, the pie, so we get the whole pie in the end. But we can quickly, test and change and be sure that the changes we make are, reliable and going to give us the output we want. Hopefully part of that involves a compose database where we actually keep track of everything that goes into each release, each compose, so that we can know, in Fedora 21, these are the RPMs we shipped. In RC1 we shipped these, RC2 we shipped these, and this is the difference. It gives us the ability to see what's actually changed in the compose database. Some way to define the product. Today we don't have a really good way to say, hey, this is the base, working group, the base working group has said that they're responsible for the minimal install in Anaconda, but what that actually entails is kind of a vague, hand-wavy, it's a minimal install in Anaconda. It's not, very clearly defined. We need a really clear way to define this is what, each of the different parts of the, product are. Docker, just because. And we need to be willing to fail, which doesn't mean, fail as a project, but, try new things. When, the new Docker comes along or the new Atomic comes along, quickly adopt it, integrate it, and try it. And if it doesn't work, hey, we learned something. We were kind of slow in adopting Docker in Fedora. We were kind of slow in adopting the cloud in Fedora. We were kind of slow in adopting many things in Fedora. And it's, some of it's because, hey, it's too hard to do. And, what if we don't get it right? And, we're never going to get everything right. But if we don't try, we're never going to get everything, close to right. So for Rawhide, feel free to ask questions at any time too. You don't have to just listen to me talk the whole time. So for Rawhide, changes that I'd like to make is gate the builds. Instead of when a build is done, it gets tagged straight into F22 today. We tag it into an F22 staging. We run automatic, composers on it. Some of this I've already gone through, so I'll try to make it quick. I've only got 10 minutes left. We automatically make side tags when things break, and to deal with it. We automate the QA so that when a build is done, we make sure it doesn't break things. We get red flags when surnames bump and stuff like that. We sign all the RPMs. Today, we don't sign Rawhide. We've had an effort for a while now to sign Rawhide RPMs automatically, and it mostly works, but it's not complete. But that's something that a few users have complained about, and it's a good thing to have because it gives you an extra level of, hey, this thing came from Fedora. That when the RPM is signed. And do full composers of Rawhide that match the release. So today, when we do the nightly Rawhide compose, we mash the everything repo, we run Punji to make the install tree, and we call that Rawhide. That's nothing like what we actually ship. We don't, we ship different trees, different products. We do make the live CDs, and we do make the cloud images, and we make the ARM disk images, but we say you want them, go to Koji and find them and get them. We don't make a tree of them and push it out to the mirrors. So all of that kind of stuff, we should do so that what we ship every night looks like what we call Fedora and what we ship as Fedora. Some tie-in improvements for it is hopefully a better developer experience. We can look at having a developer portal of for lack of a better name, where instead of going to Bodai, instead of going to PackageDB, instead of going to Koji, you go to one place, you see everything. We kind of did that with the packages years ago, but it was slow and it didn't actually replace anything. It just kind of got bits of information from everything. And when you wanted to go into the finer details, it took you to PackageDB, it took you to Koji, it took you to Bodai. We should just have one place where you go and you see, you search for a build, you click on it, you can see it was used in these releases or in these composers. It was pushed as an update and it was pushed on this day. I want to add Joe to my package as a co-maintainer, so I find my package and I say, I add Joe as a co-maintainer, all in the one place without having to, go to multiple places. Hopefully, it would give a better user experience. And hopefully by doing things like having proper support of products and rings, we can make ways for people to scratch their itch more easily. Allow people to experiment with different things or do different things on top of Fedora a little bit more easily. When you don't have to look at the whole chunk, you can just look at part of the chunk. So we would have, hopefully, we would have more automated QA, integration testing, and lots of stuff happening in Tasktron and support for, for that. So why do we want to do all of this? Docker and Atomic are not the last new shiny. They kind of come up and, we've done the same thing for so long, and they kind of come up and bit us in the butt. And I think you can be pretty sure that something else is going to come along and change what, IT is, what the architecture is. My sanity, because, if we kept going as we were, I'd end up as a little vegetable and crawling in the corner, and it's not quite. To help keep Fedora relevant, if we don't, IT is, I think, in the last 18 months has probably changed more than it did in the 20 years before. To an extent, not completely, but it's changed quite a lot. If we don't, come up with ways to keep up with the change, we'll become irrelevant because we can't do anything. We'll be, Debian or GNU Herd or something. Improve the reaction time and enable wider contribution and use. So hopefully, all these changes we do in Fedora directly relate to RHEL and CentOS, where they can use what we do. That then will mean that instead of having a small Fedora RHEL-eng team doing the tooling, there's this bigger, wider community of people that are working on the tooling and helping fix things, and so it's a lighter workload for people overall. A couple of possible issues I see in the future is mirrors not scaling. At the moment, we push out just over 1 terabyte in pub Fedora. If we add, a heap more stuff, we might have 2 or 3, terabytes, and the mirrors get mad because we're using too much disk, we're using too much bandwidth, we're causing too much load on their servers, and they say, it's been great hosting you, but sorry, we're done. So, we may need to start to think about different ways to deliver Fedora that doesn't involve mirrors and the mirror network, and ways to support incompatible products. If someone comes along and wants to do something that's kind of server-like but completely incompatible with what the server's doing, how do we do that? No concrete examples of that, but just it's a thought that I had that people could come up with doing stuff that's incompatible with other stuff that we're doing, and how do we deal with that conflict? Questions at all? Yep.
So you said you want to reduce the number of updates to packages, and everyone who wants the latest stuff should just use Rawhide. But I think in the end, this is not what Fedora, what users want, and especially not what Fedora users want. I mean, in the end, you see users getting new. They want the latest version of their applications. They even download the latest Firefox directly from upstream on distributions where they don't do it. They also download the latest LibreOffice directly from upstream, sometimes even on Fedora, because we're maintaining it too conservatively. I think for this kind of packages, the users want the latest and greatest, and all users, not just developers.
Right. If they want the latest and greatest, they use Rawhide. We put in processes to make sure that what we're pushing out is not, horribly broken, is not going to break their machines, is not going to result in. Yeah, that's what the gating's for, is to make sure that what goes out is, good.
That's not what keeps people from using Rawhide. It's the kind of changes like USR move or something. In a rolling release model, they can happen at any time. You have no way to control when you are ready for this kind of changes.
Potentially.
Or also replacing, say, GNOME 2 by GNOME 3 or KDE Plasma 4 by KDE Plasma 5. This is the kind of things that users don't want. And in Rawhide, they get the latest applications, but they also get those changes. doesn't break things. I want to get to that.
I'm gonna break. You made your point, and actually, I agree with you to a great extent. I think implementations like Colin's RPMO's OS tree are probably a decent feature for Rawhide because it's not about what you break; it's about the ability to get back what you had the day before. That's important. And so you can cope with those changes as long as you can come back to the platform. But being able to do that is probably going to be contingent on something that Colin's thinking about very hard right now, which is how can we layer other sort of package layers or other OS tree layers on top of each other. And I think that's going to end up being a way that Rawhide could work for more people. But I would agree that developers are users too. They don't want their systems to break under them and spend a day fixing them.
Right. And the idea of the gating would be to make sure that it doesn't break from under them. And yeah, that does mean that sometimes you'll go from, GNOME 2 to GNOME 3, but in the instance of something like that, or from KDE 4 to KDE 5, I would hope that the working, the SIG or the people, the working group or whatever that's working on that thing would say, hey, you know what, we're going to use coppers or something like that, and build it and test it to the point where when that gets changed for the user in Rawhide, it's widely tested and it's known that it's not going to break anything and it's okay.
Imagine how much to test it is a new major version. It is going to be disruptive. It is not going to understand all the configuration from the previous version. It is going to cause changes to look different by design. Upstream wants it that way. And a new major version is always going to be disruptive. No way of testing is going to solve this issue. This must go to new releases. That's what releases are for.
These are ideas. These aren't set.
It's not a...
Throwing ideas out for discussion. I think so. I think it's a great discussion to have about what how we can do better at Rawhide. I think it's very important.
Right.
How we get there, I think we haven't really. I don't think we've got.
Yeah.
I don't think we really have a great answer.
We're nearly out of time. We're out of time. So, questions outside? Thank you. And here's the URL to provide feedback.
Question. Koji is being more tough.
There is another goal.
No, no. I stay.